please remember to leave a like, a comment, share the video about, and if you haven't already, subscribe. Thank you. Well, isn't this just fantastic? Captain's Log, Subdate 230227.6. Nothing quite like starting the week off by revisiting an old favourite that refuses to stay down. Kinda reminds me of the Forks, who are very much having a go, which is both futile and yet oddly admirable. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. I am not, in this video, going to revisit and retell what I've already retold so many times already about the person we are going to discuss today. I will link the playlist and we shall move on. But we're going to have a starting point, and that would be the Where Are They Now from December of last year. At that point, opinions were starting to sway and shift in favour of giving the person we are discussing today another chance, because more has come to light that would certainly make it seem like perhaps she was not as much of a culprit as she is as much a victim. I am speaking of Shamima Begum, who has been trying for quite some time since having her citizenship revoked to get back to the United Kingdom to be repatriated. Every attempt so far has failed, but as with all democratic processes, there are multiple levels and many different courts one can go to exhaust every possible option and opportunity to get what you want. And in the case of Shamima, that is to come home. Because she believes she is stateless, it is an argument that has persisted for years. She has Bangladeshi citizenship. Just because they said no does not mean at any point that she is entitled to the UK citizenship. But, again, this is not so clear-cut as it once was. Finding out someone from Canada is responsible for the grooming aspect that got her there in the first place, or facilitating as well, certainly makes things a little trickier. When we left Shamima, she was taking her appeal to the next court, the next step up, and that is where we are now going to go to discuss what has happened to bring her here. But I do want to preface with one thing, and that is some coverage that has been taking place concerning Shamima. Outlets that have been a bit generous, or perhaps they haven't been as neutral, or perhaps because they've wasted license payer money making a documentary that nobody wants. And yes, obligatory, defund the BBC. So to the first article from the Daily Express. The BBC documentary that I just mentioned began with Shamima Begum admitting to presenter Josh Baker that she did join ISIS when she left the UK at 15 years old. She then goes on to share her thoughts about what people think about her now, explaining she feels the population see her as a danger and a potential risk, and that when people think of ISIS, they think of her. The programme itself starts with Shamima recalling the moment she said goodbye to her mother, quoted as saying, "I woke up early in the morning, maybe 5-6 o'clock, because our flight left at 12 o'clock, so we wanted to be there early. Our bags were already somewhere else, like hidden somewhere else. I had to make an excuse as to why I was going, so I was like, I have extra classes that I need to go to, and my mother simply believed me. I just stood there with her being quiet and stuff, and then I got on the bus and I said bye, and she was just really quiet. She was just staring at me and not saying anything, and I said bye to her, and I got on the bus and left." The response to this on social media is quite simply, the Shamima Begum story on BBC Two, I won't for one be watching that pile of poop. She knew what she was doing when she signed up for it. And the Shamima Begum story, why are you wasting license payers' money on this girl? She knew what she was doing. As you can see, there are many more who are quite irritated, believing the BBC are shameful for giving Shamima a platform. Some will undoubtedly find it quite insightful to get her perspective on things and to learn from these mistakes made. But do those mistakes on their own qualify enough for her to be allowed to come back? And that is a question that is persisting for quite some time. As long as there are appeals, that question will be unlikely to be answered fully. Now, the current version of the appeal is less about being stateless and more about whether or not she was a victim of trafficking for sexual exploitation, or is a committed ISIS volunteer who is a threat to the United Kingdom. There is another article that was doing its rounds around the time of early February concerning her jihadi husband, Yago, I'm not even going to pretend to know how to pronounce his last name. I believe he's Dutch. A convert who is currently behind bars in Syria, who had to teach her obedience and how to please her husband. This isn't a joke, because when they met they had 10 minutes to work out whether or not they could click. Shortly before the ceremony, Shamima gave him a list of what has been dubbed weird questions and requests, including being able to visit friends. Her husband, in the BBC documentary interview, said he took the schoolgirl to the park for ice cream after they were married by an ISIS judge. He said at first she was clueless about how to be a wife, but then learned how married life worked, the importance of respect, pleasing her husband, and obedience. Asked what he meant by obedience, he replied, "When I ask her to do something, then she does it. It's not very hard." When he explained how they had those 10 minutes to sort of click, he said, "I just wanted a partner who I could find some rest with and who could take care of me. I asked if she knew how to cook and she said yes. Our meeting was 10 minutes max. We decided we wanted to try it. We don't have such a thing as dating or going out and having a meal together. You get to know each other a bit, and if you click, you decide to take this step." How cute. Courtship, but done minimalist. Now, as you can tell from this picture of her loving husband, you can see prisoners really suited him well. He's currently in prison by the very people he slaughtered. I guess it swings in roundabouts, and what goes around comes around. Congratulations, I hope it was all worth it. There is one other thing that had transpired concerning another 15-year-old girl, but I'm not being drawn into it. It is a false equivalence of a rather large magnitude. Instead, now we're going to skip to the recent appeal. On February the 22nd, 2023, Shamima Begum lost her legal challenge over the decision to deprive her of her British citizenship and will not be allowed back into the United Kingdom. This is contrary to the belief that she's already here anyway. She had recently challenged the Home Office at the Special Immigration Appeals Commission, the SIAC, over the decision by claiming she was a child trafficking victim. The tribunal, however, dismissed the challenge, ruling that while there was a credible suspicion that Shamima was trafficked to Syria for sexual exploitation, this was not enough for appeal to succeed. Mr. Justice J added that whether she posed a threat to national security was a decision for politicians and not the courts. Shamima's lawyers have vowed to appeal this ruling. Sajid Javid, who was the Home Secretary at the time, the one who actually stripped her of her citizenship, tweeted, "I welcome today's court ruling which has again upheld my decision to remove an individual's citizenship on national security grounds. This is a complex case, but Home Secretaries should have the power to prevent anyone entering our country who is assessed to pose a threat to it." Gareth Pearce, one of Shamima's lawyers, called the decision an extraordinary judgment delivered in an extraordinary way. While speaking outside Fieldhouse in central London, Shamima's lawyer added that the Commission is clearly deeply troubled by the case it is having to decide and by the limitations placed on it by the Supreme Court. The implication, the outcome that we face, that no British child who has been trafficked outside the UK will be protected by British state if the Home Secretary invokes national security. The attempt here is to set some kind of precedent. Daniel Ferner, another member of Shamima's legal team, said the case was nowhere near over and they would in turn challenge the ruling by saying, "In terms of the legal fight, that's nowhere near over. We're not going into details about exactly what that means at this stage. What else the judgment calls out for, though, is some courage and some leadership from the Home Secretary to look at this case afresh in light of the clear and compelling factual findings this court has made. We are going to challenge this decision." It's interesting now they try again to challenge the Home Secretary aspect. They tried this last year, arguing that the Home Office had failed lawfully to consider that she had travelled to Syria and remained there as a victim of child trafficking. That was thrown out. Giving the decision of the tribunal, Mr. Justice J said the reasonable people will differ over the circumstances of Shamima's case. The Commission has fully recognised the considerable force in the submissions advanced on behalf of Ms. Begum, that the Secretary of State's conclusion on expert advice that Ms. Begum travelled voluntarily to Syria is as stark as it is unsympathetic. Further, there is some merit in the argument that those advising the Secretary of State see this as a black and white issue, when many would say that there are shades of grey. If asked to evaluate all the circumstances of Ms. Begum's case, reasonable people with knowledge of all the relevant evidence will differ, in particular in relation to the issue of the extent to which her travel to Syria was voluntary, and the weight to be given to that factor in the context of all others. Likewise, reasonable people will differ as to the threat she posed in 2019 to the national security of the UK, and as to how that threat should be balanced against all countervailing considerations. However, under our constitutional settlement, these sensitive issues are for the Secretary of State to evaluate and not for the Commission. There are a couple of the things that have come to light. Shamima has claimed, for example, that she was interrogated by Jihadi John while sitting in pitch black darkness after arriving in Syria, leaving her so scared she couldn't talk. But the second point of interest, and what I'm going to finish with, concerns Andrew Drury. Now, Andrew Drury I spoke about in the Where Are They Now video last year, because he had on multiple occasions gone to Syria to see her. At the time, multiple times, others had come to him asking if he'd buy their children some toys or some sweets, basically help them out. He was a pay pig of sorts. Recently, after forming a strong friendship with her, he spoke about the result of Shamima being unsuccessful. To do this, he spoke in The Spectator, saying, "We need to stop saying that Shamima was some kind of teenage victim. Everyone is an individual, responsible to some degree for their own actions. She was certainly mature enough to get herself through airports and over the Turkish-Syrian border. This isn't a dumb kid." As early as June 2022, he had started wondering if she was trying to groom him during their time together. And while he has mixed feelings about her citizenship being revoked, Shamima managed to shock him by saying that she was over the death of her children, and that when she was doing TV interviews, because she was very excited to do them, she would throw tantrums ahead of filming before clicking her finger and becoming someone with a confidence that I had not expected. Essentially, Andrew Drury, one of her biggest supporters, who believed she should be allowed to come back, and he really did believe that last year, doesn't really feel that way anymore. As strongly anyway. And that is quite telling, especially as he has first-hand experience of being with her.